Hello mortals and welcome to another video by me, Insanely ADD! I'm here to just basically info dump about my current obsession, which you might have noticed from, I think it was the last video. It's the Owl House, specifically relating to the Collector and the Archivists. I made my own version of the Archivists, and now I cannot stop thinking about them. It's like a daily thing. It's like constant. I'm always thinking about them and like storylines, what they would say, what music they would like. Just, it's consumed me, unfortunately. Pensive. But yes, so I've made my own version of the Archivists, and this video is basically an excuse for me to talk about them a lot, because I'm running an Ask blog, and what you're seeing on screen is the puppet I made for it. Because I've run Ask blogs before, and I always get, like, to a point where it's like I cannot draw a new image every time I answer a question. It makes me insane. So, what I've decided to do this time is I've made puppets that have, like, configurable expressions and some slight pose changes that I can use to answer my asks. And I think it's going pretty well, considering I've already made all 4 of the Archivists. And what you're currently seeing on screen, this is Satellite. They are one of the twins. The other twin is Solari, who popped up on screen briefly. But yes, I'm probably going to try to put a picture of them on screen right now to show you what they look like. But yeah, my Archivists are Penumbra, the eldest. She is the orange-ringed planet Archivist. Crescent, the second eldest. He is the blue crescent moon Archivist and goes by he and she pronouns. Then there's the twins, Satellite and Solari, who are the exact same age because the way that I headcanon they have children, which is by summoning them via magic spell, it means that they're the exact same age. There is no older or younger twin. And the twins are like the nicest, even though they might not come across like that, they are the nicest of the Archivists. The one who will come across like the nicest is Crescent, but Crescent is the Grand Huntsman, and oh, she is evil! So evil! So, like, you may detect sincerity in his voice. It's not real. It's a ruse. Run for your life! Anyway, so, because this is basically just an excuse for me to info dump about the Archivists, I have pulled up my post where I describe their, some headcanons, their relationships with each other, and with the Collector, and also their parent that I made up for them. Before I get into describing the relationships of the siblings, which I think I did a really good job writing and describing, it is important you know a few background details that are also headcanons. As a little heads-up warning, under the cut there will be mentions of imprisonment, neglect, abuse, manipulation, toxic family dynamics, child murder, the Titans, murder, also the Titans, abandonment, guilt, and PTSD. I think that's it. Let me know which of the Archivists are your least favorite. I'll be keeping track, and so far one of them is ahead by a lot. I'm sure you could guess. It's Crescent! Woo! Everyone hates Crescent, you know? Which is valid. He's pretty bad. Free headcanon before we transition to Under the Read more. I gave the Collector and the Archivist true names, and in the Archivist case, specific code names. For instance, Penumbra is the coordinator because she is in charge. Crescent is the charmer because he deals the most with interacting with mortals and charming them and making them like, oh wow, you're so wonderful, I can't believe I'll do anything you say. Yeah! And Solari's is the curator because she curates and organizes the archive, and Satellite's is the cartographer because they go off and explore space looking for new planets to collect from. Anyways, I did this because I have a headcanon that the reason we never learn any normal names for any of them is that if a mortal knows a collector's true name, then that mortal, non-collector, has power over them. Their magic no longer has much, if any, effect, and they can be harmed by the mortal. They had one parent named Nebula, who used Z-Zem pronouns. Their parent has been imprisoned for trying to raise their children to believe contrary to the extremism of destroying planets when people get mad about their loved ones being kidnapped. Which would probably reflect onto the children that their parent cared more about their contrarian morality than them, since Z definitely would have known that what would happen if or when Z was caught. They have to have had a parent because the large age disparity between the eldest archivist and the collector would typically imply a more parental role, so they need to have all shared a parent. When the other collectors came to arrest Nebula, Z tried to fight it so Z could stay with her children, but Z were easily outnumbered and overpowered. After Nebula was apprehended, the other collectors began to round up the children so they would be brought to new adults to be raised properly. But once they noticed Penumbra was roughly adult age, they asked her if she would be willing to become their caretaker, as otherwise the other children may all be separated, because who would want to suddenly accept 5 new children, including an infant? So Penumbra took on all the responsibility herself to prevent them from being separated. Next info bit relates to a theory I have about the room where Philip found the collector's disc, and how it could not have been made by the Titan. Oh yeah, let me just teleport this into my skull where I have conveniently made a locked door to put it behind, or the Titan trappers. They would have absolutely taken the disc instead. So this room had to have been made by somebody, and the most likely candidate is the Archivists. To expand upon this, I believe they absolutely had access to Titan blood and the disc, and chose to leave the collector behind. They most likely did this because whoever found the disc would very quickly find out they need Titan's blood or a Titan's help to release the collector. In any case, the last Titan would need to be hatched and accessible. The Archivists very likely assumed that he would return to them when that happened, and they'd go back to the planet to finish what they started, killing the last Titan if they were not already killed to release them, and then possibly microwaving the planet. You know, like the rhyme. We'll clear the planet and scorch the air. Now, for their relationships! Nebula, the Archivist parent, loves all of their children dearly and hopes they are all doing well without them. Penumbra. Penumbra had a very good relationship with Nebula, but after Z was in prison for raising them wrong, Penumbra resents them. Their actions led to Penumbra being forced to raise 4 children all by herself while she herself was barely an adult by the standards of collector society. I'd say 16, but simultaneously I'm assigning numbers for convenience to myself rather than being a true translation of their ages, as I feel many of our concepts of aging and other things are not truly cross-compatible. Taking care of a teenager, 14, that's Crescent, 2 children, 8, that's Satellite and Solari, and a toddler, 2, that's the Collector, aka Cosmos, which is what he might be referred to as frequently in this, by the way. All while trying to continue her duties as a collector. Starting at the collector equivalent of 8 years old, they can assist on collections, so Satellite, Solari, and Crescent all would have been able to help to varying degrees. This would have been extremely stressful for her, and it strained her relationship with all of her younger siblings. She gets along the best with Crescent, since he was old enough to be almost entirely self-sufficient, though she was still very immature. They would occasionally come to points of contention specifically about how much Crescent should be allowed to do, with both of them having different perspectives on what he can do and what he can't do. Penumbra felt like she should contribute more on collections and play less with Cosmos, the Collector, while Crescent felt like she should be allowed to help care for and watch Cosmos more, since Penumbra assigning herself as sole caretaker of them was obviously wearing her out. This would ease as Crescent got older, but as Cosmos also got older and less dependent, Penumbra became less stressed, which made Crescent press less about caring for him, though she still enjoyed spending time with them. If any of the Archivists were like they'd want children, it would be Crescent, and you will soon find out why that's bad. Penumbra has a much more tense relationship with Satellite, who took Nebula's imprisonment the hardest. Penumbra feels like Satellite resented her for the role she was forced to fill as their new sole caretaker. Satellite became much more quick to anger and was more openly hostile when in a bad mood, which is ultimately why Penumbra decided that they should be the cartographer, because it gave them a lot of time by themselves, since it seemed so obvious to her that they couldn't stand their own family. Penumbra has a bitterness towards Satellite for their repeated verbal abuse towards Cosmos. All she wanted was for them to play nice with their baby brother so she could have a moment alone with her thoughts or to work on projects, and sometimes it worked, but it was impossible for her to tell when Satellite is in a bad mood, since they suppress their emotions until they explode. Until she hears them screaming and Cosmos crying and has to show up and yell at Satellite and comfort Cosmos. Penumbra has a horrible relationship with Solari. Unless they are speaking on official matters regarding their jobs, Solari has a tendency to undercut everything with sarcasm and disdain. Solari only ever seems truly happy and genuine when deep in thought, organizing and categorizing the archives, which was something Penumbra picked up on quite quickly, seeing as how organized and easy to find everything in their room was, especially compared to the random hordes of assorted trinkets present in Crescent and Satellite's room, and her own, if she felt like being honest, and assigned her as the archive's curator. Penumbra feels like Solari needs to be preoccupied with other tasks while interacting with anyone, because otherwise she expends her excess mental energy to be snide and cold to people, like they want to tell jokes but she's too mean or emotionally distant to bother thinking of ones that aren't cruel. Penumbra also deeply dislikes Solari's tendency to be rough with Cosmos when she sends him off to play with them. He doesn't seem to mind the Shooting Star game, which is a game where Solari picks up Cosmos and launches him into space so he can fly really far and really fast, as long as he isn't thrown into objects or so far away that they can't find their way back. But Solari does things that scare Cosmos and piss off Penumbra, like boxing him into small spaces or stomping their foot hard enough for their floor to crack right in front of them, or punching walls and slamming doors when she's aggravated about them being around. She's never actually hurt them on purpose, with a few accidental times resulting in Solari immediately apologizing, healing him if necessary, and leaving him alone. But if the day ever comes where they do hurt him on purpose, Penumbra is fully prepared to wring their neck and lock her in her room for 100 years. Impeccable talent for organizing be damned. Penumbra has a complicated relationship with Cosmos. She is their older sister, but also effectively their mother, having been his sole caretaker for a majority of his life. But she's also exhausted by him. She raised Cosmos from a literal infant into a curious and playful child. Unfortunately, the playfulness and curiosity are a non-stop feature and not one that only conveniently exists when she wants a break from her duties or when she's giving him lessons on their culture, the universe, or their vast collection. She also gets easily frustrated with them just like the twins do, but she prides herself on being able to easily dismiss those feelings despite her bone-deep burnout for childcare. She sends him on tasks in the archives, uses the cultures of the beings she's observing at any given time to concoct new games for him to play, or redirects him to any of the other available siblings. She loves them very much, but she also desperately wanted a break from him. Crescent. Crescent had the worst relationship with Nebula, which isn't to say it was even bad, but that once she found out that they were breaking their laws by teaching them all incorrectly, he turns them in. Crescent much prefers the rules as they are meant to be, because the way Nebula taught them was much less efficient, which is what she prefers. It wasn't until the incident with the Titans that he became more openly gleeful about ending the lives of mortals. Before then, it remained largely just another part of her duties as a collector. Nobody knows how other collectors found out about Nebula doing this, and Crescent knows better than to tell his siblings about this. Crescent feels like an equal to Penumbra in that they are both the eldest, with only a few quote-unquote years apart from each other. He is given free rein to make executive decisions while performing her duties on planets alone, for the most part. She still has a slight bitterness about Penumbra refusing to let him help raise Cosmos, because she believes if Penumbra was less stressed, she would have lashed out less to Satellite and Solari, and blames her for some of their behavioral issues. For the most part, though, he doesn't let these feelings interfere at all with how he interacts with her, because they are the charmer, and she prides herself on being able to be incredibly charismatic, smoothing over moments of tension between Penumbra and the twins easily, lying to and manipulating mortals even more easily. Crescent silently despises Satellite. She would never let it slip how she really feels about them, but inside, whenever they are forced to interact, she is constantly imagining scenarios in which it may be appropriate to punch them. He hates their inability to telegraph how they're feeling more clearly, because she hates not being able to read people, because everything comes easy to her, except for genuine conversation. Their emotional constipation means it's harder for him to get a read on how best to placate or flatter them in any given situation. His frustration about this, coupled with Satellite's extreme hostility at the drop of a hat, makes it so Crescent loathes interaction with them. Crescent outwardly gets along very well with Solari, as he can very easily figure out the best course of action to take in any given interaction they share. He still doesn't enjoy her company that much, though, as her tendency to jokingly insult her pisses her off, especially paired with what Crescent perceives as extreme arrogance when Solari tries to act intimidating and tough to him. Crescent is probably the most physically fit of all the Archivists. Magically, it is much harder to decipher who's on top. And it is insulted that the least physically capable of all of them, excluding the actual child, even entertains the idea that she could fight him, especially with her misplaced confidence in these moments that Crescent perceives to be them believing they could even win. At every opportunity that has presented itself, Crescent fights her and takes them down very easily, which makes Solari even more passive-aggressive and angry at him. Crescent adored Cosmos, always enjoying playing with him, telling him stories about the collection she's gone on recently, teaching him new magic tricks. Crescent liked that they were easy to read and easy to lead, easily redirecting their energy at tasks and games that could easily preoccupy them until they got tired enough to sleep. Still, he believed it was a great idea to send them to the Titan planet to see how he would do on his first excursion as an actual collector. Even after the Titans proved to be able to harm Cosmos, he weighed the benefits against the risks of leaving them there. Benefits being that he would function as a good distraction while she whipped up a quick plan to wipe the Titans out, risks being the Titans catching on and harming Cosmos or doing so accidentally. Crescent concluded the Titans were far too nice to harm them, and believed himself to be clever enough to quickly mount up an attack on the Titans that would wipe them out before they'd even be able to register what happened. Satellite. Satellite loved Nebula, more than anyone, even their own twin, but don't tell Solari that. The feeling of betrayal and abandonment they felt when it was revealed that Z had broken their laws which resulted in Zer imprisonment destroyed everything they knew in their mind. Satellite is afraid of Penumbra, which used to not be the case, at least not to the same extent. Satellite never really got along with any of their siblings except Solari on a consistent basis, but Penumbra's idea to make them the cartographer at first felt fine. Even Satellite didn't fully understand what would set them off, and enjoyed the time alone and moments of peace they got exploring space and searching out new places to collect from. Eventually, they realized that they actually hated being alone. They didn't like how easily Penumbra sent them to do probably the most isolating task any of them could do to maintain their archive. This strained their relationship quite a bit, but seeing how easily Penumbra was able to cast aside Cosmos after he was sealed in the mirror shook something in them. They thought Penumbra loved Cosmos more than any of the other siblings, a leftover piece of jealousy from him receiving so much attention after Nebula was taken away. But they couldn't comprehend Penumbra actually even disliking them in any capacity, so it simply meant that to Penumbra all of the other archivists were disposable if she came up with a good enough reason to abandon them. Satellite is also afraid of Crescent, but for reasons that are the same and completely different. I'm sorry if you hear my cat meowing in the background. I think she's got the zoomies or something right now, and I'm sorry, but I can't pay attention to you, baby. The same, because Crescent couldn't even argue with Penumbra's plan to leave the disk on the Titan planet, which I'm going to call Titania if I catch it from now on, and in fact came up with the idea to leave behind folklore and stories about the Collector, who was so powerful to entice people to seek him out and try to release him. Different, because while Satellite was more apathetic to mortals, the lessons Nebula told them about how mortal life is sacred and should be protected, which is only slightly different from what they were meant to be told about how mortal life is sacred and must be protected by collecting unless they resist, in which case they should be taken by force in their home and any stragglers left to die as they destroyed their planet, resulted in Satellite being deeply disturbed by Crescent's total glee upon orchestrating mortals to fight the Titans on his behalf, easily ignoring how many of the Titan trappers she had trained were killed in the battles against the full-grown Titans, wearing the skulls of the babies and children, and encouraging the trappers and other archivists to do the same. Satellite knows how good she is at reading people. They aren't stupid. They see how, when Crescent is around, fights are resolved easily, how the mortal trappers were so easily swayed by her words and loyally fought in battle for him to the very last breath. Satellite isn't as good at reading people, but they sense their emotional non-transparency frustrates him, which Satellite is just fine with, to a small extent because it can be used to protect them from her, but also, they worry about it making Crescent angry enough to do something about it one of these days. Solari is Satellite's only friend. They confide in her frequently about what they are feeling and spend much of their time when not exploring space hanging out with them in the archives while she sorts, categorizes, and organizes things. Solari is almost never on the receiving end of one of their meltdowns, especially since they were one of the ones to be there for them the most after Nebula was gone. They still do get into fights. They are siblings, of course, but they are not even remotely on the same level as one of them fighting with Penumbra or Crescent. Satellite has shared their worries about Crescent and Penumbra so easily discarding Cosmos, and how they worry how easily they would get rid of them or her. Solari understands them, and they agree quite frequently on things, though their jobs typically keep them far apart. Satellite did like Cosmos. They have extreme difficulty expressing how they feel and clearly communicating their needs in social situations, which very often resulted in Cosmos being an actual child and thus even more oblivious to social etiquette than Solari, with none of the lifelong bonding Satellite has with her to guide Cosmos through their interactions, getting on their nerves severely. It was about a 50-50 chance for Satellite to be in a relatively good mood to speak with Cosmos, enjoying them chatting about assorted things, especially when they got to lie and teach them the wrong things about space or magic, which resulted in Penumbra giving them the stink eye when Cosmos finally got around to asking her about whether black holes get sick and throw up when too much stuff goes in them at once. Satellite did not like yelling at any of their siblings, but they also don't know how else to act when overwhelmed, because it's not like any of them have had the same issues as them. Now that Cosmos is gone, Satellite is very upset at how they treated him. Satellite feels like they should have realized that they were distant and cold, and Solari was distant and cold, and Penumbra was detached, and Crescent was very nearly always busy, and they wondered if he felt the same way that they do, about being so very alone with almost no one to talk to about how they really feel. Solari loved Nebula quite a bit, though they could tell that Satellite was always more excited to spend time with Zem than her. They didn't let that get her down. Seeing their parent taken from them, and how badly it hurt Satellite, made them resent Nebula after the fact. Solari hates Penumbra, mainly because she was smart enough to, just like Crescent, realize that if she relinquished some control over Cosmos when they were a baby to Crescent, she would have been more present for Satellite, like they desperately needed her to be. As they got older, her resentment manifested in cold hostility for all members of the family that they felt were failing her twin. Penumbra isolates them, Crescent is annoyed he can't just puppet them to do what she wants, and Cosmos got all the attention, or that's what she thought. Penumbra's obvious disdain for Solari just fuels her own disdain for her right back. They frequently get into fights. Solari was horrified by Penumbra's suggestion that they leave the Collector's mirror disk, all that remained of him, on the Titan planet, Titania, because what amounted to the corpse, though not dead, of their sibling could be used as a signal to them for when the final Titan frees them or is killed so they can finish the job they started and finally destroy the planet. Solari despises Crescent. The way he is able to easily turn events in her favor when there is a disagreement, the fact that he is given so much freedom from Penumbra compared to herself or Satellite, the way that Crescent avoids Satellite simply because she does not care to be genuine in conversations with them, not to mention when instead of arguing that since they had Titan's blood and the disc, they should release Cosmos immediately, he agreed to Penumbra's plan and contributed. It deeply disgusted Solari, especially since her and Satellite agreed that Crescent and Cosmos were closer with each other than any of the rest of them were with either. She loves to get under his skin by challenging her authority, even though she knows they will always lose in a hand-to-hand fight. She does it anyways because they can tell it makes him angry to see her self-assured superiority challenged. Satellite is the only person Solari is really close with, both of them speaking to each other about their concerns regarding their older siblings when they have the chance to. Solari knows Satellite the best out of any of their siblings, which is why her sarcasm and teasing is always intentional and never mean-spirited with them. Solari was the one to comfort Satellite the most about Nebula, which shocked and upset her, because they could not understand why neither of the older siblings could tell or seem to care about how much they were hurting. Together they realized that they had been terrible to Cosmos through no fault of his own, and they both deeply regret how they treated him. They've spoken before about it and how they have a dream that if Cosmos were ever able to return to them, they'd all run away together to keep their older siblings from continuing to use and neglect him. Solari has a lot of regrets about Cosmos. She wishes she could have realized that they never did anything wrong, or hurt them, Solari and Satellite, intentionally. They know now that he deserved much better than what he got. This regret typically manifests in her being even more upset at how Penumbra and Crescent treated them. How dare they care more about practicality and their carefully laid plans and stupid protocol more than their own brother. Whenever she thinks about her and Satellite's own treatment of them, she becomes repulsed with herself. She tries to avoid thinking about it, because it only comes up in her mind when she's alone sorting the archives and cataloging new entries, a task they do so effortlessly that the guilt and what-ifs end up consuming her until she realizes she stopped her work entirely and is standing entirely too still with her non-existent stomach turning and her eyes burning but never fully crying. The Collector / Cosmos. Cosmos doesn't know how to feel about Nebula. On one hand, they never would have been taken from him and his siblings if they had simply done what they were supposed to. But on the other hand, now that Cosmos is separated from their own siblings and the culture of other collectors, he wonders if Nebula would have been proud of them for disagreeing with what he was raised to believe, and managing to escape from the grip it had on them. They've heard stories from their older siblings. Penumbra's stories about them were simply meant to impress upon him some lesson or to pass on a story that was originally told to Penumbra as part of the lessons she would teach him, though she avoided speaking about Zer in any other context. Crescent stories would usually come back to about how what Z did was wrong, and how Z put Zer morality above what was actually legal and accepted practice. Satellite loved speaking about Nebula. It was one of the seemingly only guaranteed ways to cheer them up, unless the story was specifically the day that the Z were arrested. That was one of the guaranteed ways to make them more upset than anything else he could think of. Solari's stories were tinged with bitter resentment. Though she had good stories about Zer kindness, they would always finish their story with, "But Z still chose to break the law and abandon us." It was giving him mixed messages. Cosmos had thought that Penumbra was one of their nicest siblings. He loved spending time with her, he enjoyed their lessons, he tried to ignore the slithering feeling of pain he got in his chest whenever he could tell she was annoyed with them. Every time she tiredly redirected them to play with Satellite or Solari or Crescent when he was there, he pushed down the feeling of agonizing pain in his stomach. He knew Penumbra still loved him. She was so happy to play with them when she wasn't busy, or to teach them lessons, or read important books to them. That's what he thought, at least. Since they've been freed from their prison, he's had time to reflect on what happened. Even though Satellite was the one that told him about how he was allowed to go play with the Titans, Cosmos knew it was Penumbra who came up with the plan. It was literally her job to direct the rest of them and their missions. She was either the one that came up with the plan to kill all the Titans, or at the very least approved of the plan that was otherwise definitely Crescent's idea. She didn't bother taking him off the planet after they started. She left them there. Cosmos loved Crescent very much, the only sibling that never gave them a disappointed look, that never dismissed him, that enjoyed playing games with him, and never yelled at or scared him, which makes them even more devastated, knowing that she was the one that had all of their friends killed. Every baby Titan he befriended died, very likely because of Crescent, either indirectly by the Titan trappers or directly by her own hands. It's very hard for them to hate anyone, but they've decided they should hate him, for being so nice and so kind, only to hurt them in such a hideous way. He knows she, Penumbra, and the twins all were definitely watching him on the planet. They absolutely knew that Papa Titan blamed Cosmos for the missing and dead Titans. They still did nothing to stop him. Eventually, he figures out that they all had to have found his disc and had access to Titan's blood, and chose to not free him on purpose. The more Cosmos thinks about him, the more upset they get. Cosmos never had a very good relationship with Satellite. It was confusing how they seemed to be fine one moment and angry at them the next. It made them feel cautious when Penumbra sent him to play with them, but they were always happy when Satellite was in a good mood to play or talk. They could never tell when they were lying to him about things, but it was always funny when they did because it was never mean or about important things. Cosmos knew Satellite and Solari did not get along with Penumbra or Crescent as much as they did, so it makes them wonder if Satellite argued against leaving them on the Titan planet when they came up with the plan to kill all the Titans, if for no other reason than to just be contrarian to the other siblings. Cosmos knows that no matter which of their siblings suggested they leave him behind in the disc, it would have been approved by the elder two. So ultimately, they do not blame the twins for leaving them behind, at least not nearly as much as he blames the others. Cosmos was even more cautious about Solari than Satellite, being the scariest of their siblings. She could be so mean and they didn't understand why. When they seemed to be in a good mood, she would have them do little tasks for her, going to the archives to retrieve things for them, which in hindsight, they now realize that she likely could have just magically summoned. But it kept him occupied and taught him about how the archives were catalogued. She would teach him about each of the creatures and objects that he collected for them. When she was in a bad mood and felt like scaring him was the worst, sometimes she got so angry that she destroyed things. Nothing from the archive, of course. Penumbra would be furious if they did that, but she would smash walls and floors and doors. Sometimes when she broke things, the exploding pieces would hit him. It never really hurt, but she would always immediately apologize and heal them, even if there was never really any damage. Sometimes she would play games with him, her most favorite being the one where they would pick him up with magic and throw them as far into open space as she could. Which was mostly fun, though sometimes scary when he was thrown way too far or hit something. It didn't happen often, and he figured out a way around both of these issues by counting in their head to a preset number that he would magically stop their flight at if he was still going when they reached that number, and they would also use their flight to alter the path to avoid objects. Now that they're away, they wonder if any of their siblings actually loved him. So yes, that is my very, 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 very long post about their relationships and stuff, because I'm obsessed! I am unfortunately quite obsessed. Anyways, back to the actual speed paint. As you can see, I am currently coloring in the eyes, and I actually adjusted this slightly before I started using this puppet. It's the only one that I've had to do that with so far, I think. But the eye on the darker blue side of their face is a little bit too high up and a little bit too close to the middle, so I adjusted it by moving it down and to the left. Which isn't a big deal, except it kind of impeded on the freckles, so like that was kind of annoying and I had to keep adjusting that part, but whatever. That's not a big deal. But yeah, also, earlier in the video, while I was reading, I looked up and I saw that I was coloring in their blushing versions. This is actually related to the fact that, after I made this Ask blog, I'm pretty sure it was the day I started answering questions on it. I got 3 questions in 45 minutes of people flirting with them, and I was like, I was so unprepared! I wasn't expecting that at all, you know, because the Archivists are evil. I mean, Satellite and Solari are less evil, but they're also, like, not good people, you know what I mean? Anyways, so, like, I was expecting that to happen at a rate so close to 0 that I had nothing prepared for the instance in it happening, you know? Anyways, I've fixed that since then, and now all of the puppets that I've made of the Archivists have blushing, capabilities. But yeah, it is certainly something. One time I was answering asks and I got like 5 flirty questions in 15 minutes. people are really, really invested in flirting with the Archivists for some reason. I mean, I get it. I'm pretty sure that Solari made me realize that I'm a lesbian of some kind. But yeah, beyond that, it was just, I wasn't expecting that to happen. But if you want, I'm going to be linking my Ask blog down in the description. So if you really, really want to, you can go and send them flirty asks. But just remember, some of them are really evil. Evil, bad people that have done terrible crimes. War crimes, even. You know? But yeah, so... yes. This is how I have formatted my puppets, by the way. When I first started making them in, like, July, that's when I made Solaris. I made Solaris in July, and I made... oh my god, I don't even remember when I made Penumbras. But I made Penumbras, like, shortly after I made Solaris, because I knew from the start that I was going to have only 2 of them to begin with, because trying to juggle 4 characters at once seemed like it would be very difficult, and also I kind of wanted to set up, like, smaller dynamics between the characters, and Penumbra and Solari would be the only ones in the archive most of the time, so it seemed like a completely fine thing to have both of them, and only both of them, there to start. But yes, since then I have introduced Satellite, the cartographer. Oh yes, by the way, if you send asks, please refer to them solely by their code names. Once again, Satellite is the cartographer, Crescent is the charmer, Penumbra is the coordinator, and Solari is the curator. Anyways, so I want you to refer to them solely by those names because the premise of the blog is that you, the asker, are a collected mortal who has been freed from stasis for an experiment run by Penumbra, the coordinator. And so you don't know their real names, and their real names are closely guarded secrets, because if you know their real name, then they can't recollect you. That power doesn't work on you anymore. And a lot of their other powers don't have an effect on you. But yes. So, if you want to go ask them stuff, or flirt with them, or whatever, you can go down to the blog. Or if you just want to read what I've written so far for them, yeah, that's there. Currently, at this very moment of me doing my voiceover, Solari is in the archives organizing the most recent batch of mortals collected by the Charmer Crescent. And, what was I saying? Yeah, so, like, currently Solari is not available to be asked questions, but I'm thinking about bringing her back in soon, because there's a question I need to answer that involves her and, Crescent being there. It's specifically, I got a question a while back that was someone asking the cartographer and the coordinator, hey, what would you do if you found out some mortal was hurting your brother while he's trapped in that disc? And they were like, we would destroy them. We would rip them limb from limb and not allow them to die. And anyways, I got a new ask sent in. And this person asked basically the same question, but this time to the curator and charmer, who were not available for questions at the time the first one was asked. So, I need to bring the curator back in to answer that. But otherwise, you can ask the coordinator, charmer, or the cartographer questions, aka, hey, look, it's Penumbra. But yeah, so figuring out the blushing on their puppets was extremely difficult. I had to put everything into a clipping group. And except for the eyes. The eyes were the only thing that couldn't be in the clipping group, obviously, because, you know, the blush doesn't go into your eyeballs. So, that was a thing I had to do. It was really, really stressful to try figuring it out, because, like, everything else was so well thought out, and I was like, okay, I can do it this way, and do it that way, and with this and that and this, I can make it like that. Oh, wow, this is so easy. I got so much done. Woohoo! Anyways, so, like, that is what was going on and happened with all that stuff. And then I freaking turn around and people are like, hey, did you know you're beautiful and I want you to kiss me? Can you take me out on a date despite the fact that I am trapped in this, like, box? And I gotta say, they're all variously equipped to handle compliments and flirts to various levels. For instance, Satellite, the cartographer, he's ill-equipped, incapable. You flirt with them and they immediately die! No, they're not actually gonna die. But, yeah, they're like, that face you see on screen right now, that is their immediately reaction to getting flirted with, basically. Just like, what? What are you saying to me? And the curator, Solari, is the second most flusterable, where she's like, yeah, flirt with me, it's funny and I deserve all the compliments. And then, like, you actually flirt with her, and if you, like, there's a certain couple things that will really, like, fluster her. Like, for instance, if you're like, wow, Solari, your hair is beautiful, she'd be like, oh my god! Because she likes her hairstyle a lot, and she likes getting compliments on her hair. As goopy as it kind of looks. But yeah, and then the next most flusterable after that is the coordinator. Where she's just like standing there and she's like, I'm a professional. I will not react. I cannot react. I'm so professional about my job. I would never let it on whether or not I think that the mortals are hot. By the way, all my archivists are omnisexual because I identified as asexual for 10 years, and the asexual alien thing is like, yeah, it's like, it's a cliche. It is, sometimes people are like perceiving it as like a bad thing, but I also see the argument that like asexual aliens like make sense sometimes. Like sometimes you just make a species and it's like, okay, they wouldn't feel any attraction to anybody though. Like the way that you've dictated their species behaves, why would they feel sexual attraction to anybody, right? Anyways, so I was like thinking about that and I was like, okay, was there any way I can subvert this? Because I like subverting tropes for fun. Anyways, so I've decided to subvert it by making them omnisexual. And I don't mean that in the general term that most people use it for, where it's basically like, yeah, you're attracted to everybody. But I meant it more in the sense of really leaning onto the omni prefix for it. So basically, they're all attracted to everybody that could possibly exist. Any possible gender, any possible appearance, there is the possibility that they might be attracted to that kind of person. Because, like, you know, they go throughout all of space. They interact for millions and millions, possibly billions of years with other living creatures. Like, you really think they're not gonna, like, stop by and see, like, trillions of living creatures and be like, huh, you're kind of attractive to me. You know, I think that happens quite frequently. Like, they don't actually need, like I said, they reproduce via magic spell, so, like, whatever. But, like, attraction is different from that, isn't it? So, anyways, they're all omnisexual, so yeah, you can flirt with them and it will actually fluster them because they actually do feel attraction. Even if it's, like, completely superfluous. But it's fun, isn't it? Even if they're horrible people. Anyways, so what was I saying? Right, so yes, the coordinator's like, I am a professional. I will not flirt with the mortals. I cannot flirt with the mortals. Whereas, like, Solari will flirt back, the cartographer won't flirt back, and Charmer will flirt back. In fact, she very much enjoys flirting. A lot! Quite a bit, even! But yes, so, like, even though they're on a gradient of, how much flirting affects them, it's more like a binary yes-no to whether or not they will flirt in return. Like, the cartographer is going to be like, oh my god, why are you complimenting me? But they're also not going to say, oh, please stop that. They're going to be like, oh my god, these compliments, they're nice. But they're not going to flirt back with you, unfortunately. But the curator, she will absolutely flirt back. Like, aw, you're so funny. And then she'll, like, there's, like, this one pose that I use for her sometimes, where she's, like, winking and sticking out her tongue. For, like, because that's how she flirts. She's a little socially awkward, honestly. Because, like, she goes out and meets with mortals, like, the second least of all of them. With the cartographer meeting mortals the least, for lore reasons that you'll find out if you read the blog. Anyways, so, that's that. And then there's the Charmer. Charmer, who is just an unrepentant flirt. Who's just, like, looking at mortals like, hey, did you know, I think you're kind of neat. And maybe, if you like me back, you can help me with some things, couldn't you? You know, she's like, he really does that. He's just like, aw, you're so cute. and useful. But yeah, that's basically how he acts. He's charming, he's nice, he's sweet, he'll do little favors for you, but in return, will you give him your undying loyalty? You know, that's just how it be sometimes. Anyways, so currently I'm working on the hands for the puppets, and I think that I did a really good job with Satellite's hands and Penumbra's hands, because Penumbra has, like, long fingernails. But, I think Solari's hands are actually kind of, like, the worst, but to be fair, I also did Solari's first. And I've been, like, super leveling up my ability to draw hands since I got into the Owl House, genuinely. I've gotten so good at drawing hands lately. It's ridiculous. But I like it. I like being able to draw hands. I've always been pretty good at it. Not, like, amazing, of course. I'm not gonna say that. I'm just gonna say, yeah, I did a pretty good job with hands. I'm pretty decent at it. For instance, I've never gotten the thumb put in the wrong side of the hand. That's never happened to me. Ever. And every time I see it in someone else's art, I can see it immediately. It's the first thing I notice. I don't know why. I'm just really good at noticing that, I guess. But yeah, so hands, they're fun to draw. They're really fun to draw. And I like the way that it's done in the Owl House, and it's really helped me understand and think about hands, like, spatially. Because when I draw characters and design things, I don't know what it is, but I think of stuff a lot of the time in 3 dimensions. So, like, in my mind, instead of seeing 2-dimensional characters as 2-dimensional, I can actually, visually, in my mind, picture them in 3 dimensions, and what they would look like at all different kinds of angles. And I've gotten better and better about that kind of stuff, which is why, like, I'm really good at drawing characters when they're, like, looking up. I'm pretty decent at just jotting that down, and it looks pretty okay on the first try. This is obviously not 100% perfect every time. That'd be silly. That doesn't happen to anybody. But, yeah, so I think about characters in the 3rd dimension quite frequently. So I'm pretty good at, like, imagining that stuff. So if I get, like, nice tips and tricks to help me picture, like, other things in the 3rd dimension that might be difficult for me, like hands or feet, for instance, because feet and hands are just difficult to draw, right? I mean, like, look at Rob Liefeld! Easy joke, I know, but, like, you know, Rob, my man, if you want tips on how to draw feet wearing shoes, I can help you with that. I got a really nice, like, way that I do it. I think I do a pretty good job with it. But anyways, yeah, so, as you can see, I am currently struggling to draw a slightly curved line. Oh, the agonies of being an artist. But yeah, so if you want to come check out my blog, hang out, ask questions, accuse them of being evil pieces of shit, which, surprisingly, only one person has done, and it's my sister. They sent me an ask anonymously, and they were like, hey, did you know you're horrible pieces of shit and your little brother would hate you? Specifically directed at Charmer and Coordinator, of course, because the twins are less evil, even if they are kind of bastardly, you know? You know me and my bastard characters that I enjoy writing about. Hold on, I have got to show you this ask that my sibling sent in. Let's see. Okay. Out of the lot of ya, Coordinator and Charmer are monsters, not gods. It seems that the only good ones here are the twins. You two are awful examples of older siblings, manipulating mortals to do horrible things to each other just because they don't want to follow you, and that ruse you're putting up, Charmer, isn't cute or shall I say charming in the slightest. You can't control everything. One day you'll see how truly wrong you were. Oh, and to add salt to the wound, if your younger sibling were here, they'd be horrified about the atrocities you've committed. To be honest, after what you did before they were sealed, if they truly understood what you were doing to the Titans, I'd think they'd be afraid of you. Which is just... Oh my god! I'm so sorry, but, sibling of mine, your little anonymous person is going to get dissected alive. Like that other person that really pissed off Penumbra that one time pretty early on into the blog. Yeah, if you send in asks that make them mad enough, by the way, if you try to send in asks that make them mad, and you're trying to keep, like, a consistent interaction thing with them, like, God, if you send in asks, and you want to, like, have the same person, quote-unquote, sending the asks every time, right? Like, for instance, there's one Anon that I get called the Frog Anon. They just sign their not asked with frog. And there's some people who ask questions via, like, their actual Tumblr blogs. But, if you want to keep up this consistent persona, if you're going to send in an ask where you think you might piss them off real bad, you might want to send that anonymously and unsigned. So that way a nameless rando in blog lore gets taken away instead of the persona you've been trying to interact as, you know? Anyways, that's just a little hot tip, because otherwise, well, if you made them mad enough that they just collect you and put you back in the archive and trade you out for someone else, that's not so bad. But in the case of that one person and my sibling, as soon as I get around to answering that ask, because it's evergreen. I can answer that whenever, and it's completely relevant every single time. Anyways, so, if you're gonna send in an ask like that, just be prepared for the possibility of your character that you're asking as getting vivisected. Yeah, they're just gonna slam you down on a table, put you on magical life support, and crack you open like a frickin', like they're dissecting a burrito. Like, did they put beans in here? I said no beans. That's what they're doing with your physical body. But yes, so just be prepared for that possibility. And also, yes, do mind the tags on some of the posts, especially the ones that mention cleaning. Cleaning is a reference, of course, to that one passage in the Collector book that King reads. You know, collectors live long, we watch things pass. To preserve, to observe, we must amass. What flies, what swims, be it predator or prey, seal them up so they never fade. But should they meddle in our affairs, we'll clean the planet and scorch the air. The cleaning is a reference to that specifically, because in my headcanon, what they do is they, you know the stars that the Collector sends out that, like, collects any living person that it comes across and puts it in the archive? Right, so those things are actually used in cleaning to send sweeps on planets of mortals where they have resisted or tried to fight the Archivists' attempts to collect from them. And the stars will go out and autonomously collect as many samples as possible, and then they microwave the planet, and everyone who's left on it boils to death, essentially. Because environmental terrorism is the only way to prevent people from being mean to you online. I was gonna say online. Why? Anyways. So yes, Penumbra and Crescent are the type of people who would respond to cyberbullying with mailing a pipe bomb to the person's house. With doxing them. With getting their IP address and posting it publicly. They're that kind of person. But, like, in this case, it's, like, legal doctrine that they must adhere to, according to the laws of their, kind. Which is wild. Wild! Imagine being legally obligated to mail your enemies pipe bombs. Jesus Christ. But that's basically what's going on there. Oh, but yeah, if you want to send in asks, I'm thinking about maybe doing a couple, like, arcs on the blog. Like, for instance, let them know that humans exist. You're not humans, but it will intrigue them, and that has a plot line I have planned. Ha ha ha. One last thing before we close out the video, I'm just gonna quickly go through all the playlists I made for them on YouTube. They're unlisted, so you won't be able to find them on my channel anyways. So, Penumbra's playlist is Help by the Beatles, 21 Pilots, Stressed Out, Dog Days Are Over by Florence and the Machine, Dance by Justice, Danny Schmidt, This Too Shall Pass, Wood by Alice in Chains, Pink Floyd, High Hopes, Frances Farmer Will Have Her Revenge by Nirvana, Time by Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, My Immortal by Evanescence, Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, Landslide by Fleetwood Mac, Little Dark Age by MGMT. Crescent's playlist is The Pretender by Foo Fighters, Dangerous by Big Data, Miss Murder by AFI, Scissor Sisters, I Can't Decide, Breeze Blocks by Alt J, Lone Digger by Caravan Palace, You're Gonna Go Far Kid by The Offspring, I Get It by Chevelle, A Perfect Circle, Annihilation, You're Going Down by Sick Puppies, It's Murder by Mayhem, Oh Me by Nirvana, Secret by The Pierces, Eyes on Fire by Blue Foundation, the Zed's Dead remix, Girls Just Want to Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper, Thrice by Black Honey, Ready to Die by Andrew WK, Discord by The Living Tombstone, and Call Me Little Sunshine by Ghost. Satellite's playlist is Keep Talking by Pink Floyd, Fine Again by Seether, Unwell by Matchbox 20, Bound for the Floor by Local H, Breaking the Habit by Linkin Park, Little Talks by Of Monsters and Men, Words as Weapons by Seether, Send the Pain Below by Chevelle, Break by 3 Days Grace, This Too Shall Pass by Danny Schmidt, Lovely by Billie Eilish, System of a Down's Lonely Day, Start Shootin' by Little People, Anthem by Emancipator, Lilywood and the Prick featuring Robin Schulz, Prayer and Sea, Overwhelmed by Ryan Mack, and Little Dark Age by MGMT. Solari's playlist is The Red by Chevelle, Headstrong by Trapped, Oh No by Marina and the Diamonds, Bother by Stone Sour, Breaking the Habit by Linkin Park, Little Talks by Of Monsters and Men, Riot by 3 Days Grace, Fine Again by Seether, Send the Pain Below by Chevelle, You're Going Down by Sick Puppies, You Don't Know by Real Big Fish, Break by 3 Days Grace, Fuck You by Lily Allen, Lovely by Billie Eilish, Blue Monday by Orgy, and Little Dark Age by MGMT. And as a bonus, I also have the Collector's Playlist, which is No Lullaby by Siamese, All the Best by Siamese, Steal My Sunshine by Len, Island in the Sun by Weezer, Kids by MGMT, Fine, Sped Up by Lemon Demon, Girls, the Collector Animatic, Best of You by Foo Fighters, Through Glass by Stone Sour, which is super fitting in my opinion, When I'm Gone by Three Doors Down, Death Cab for Cutie, Soul Meets Body, High Hopes by Pink Floyd, You Might Die Tryin' by Dave Matthews Band, and Turn the Lights Off by Tally Hall. Thank you for watching my Speedpaint and listening to me ramble like an insane person. Goodbye!